welcome to the Bianca Williams Podcast. I'm your host, Bianca Williams, and this week we're going to get into a new topic with a new guest who I'm so excited to be here with. If this is your first time, welcome. I definitely encourage you to subscribe. There's always so much coming out of these episodes, and this season has been a powerhouse of wonderful guests that are doing big things. And so definitely share your feedback, like it, share with other individuals or communities. But I want to just take a minute to introduce our first guest because she can have a lot of wonderful things going on, and you guys have to hear her story, her journey in some ways with what we're talking about today, which is emotional intelligence. I want to welcome Domonique Natasha Briggs. She is the founder and president of Urban Community Alliance, LLC. She's also a published author and educator with 10 plus years of collective experience. Since transitioning out of the corporate America world, she has been privileged to serve in the roles of classroom teacher, instructional coach, and education nonprofit manager, strengthening her skills and her love for the field of social emotional development throughout her career. In addition to pursuing her calling to bring humanity into the workplace, Domonique is a plant-loving, multiple instrument playing, yoga practicing, HBCU graduate who spends time outside of work loving on her two beautiful daughters. Welcome, Domonique. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking that time out to talk to us today. And I want to just get into it because we were talking about something that I feel like is a topic that's kind of brewing all the time, but I don't know if people all the way understand it, right? I think there's some misconceptions around emotional intelligence. So, to just kind of kick it off, can you explain the concept of emotional intelligence and its significance in navigating relationships?
Yes, I can do that. And before I start talking about EQ, which is my affectionate name for emotional intelligence, I just want to thank you for even reaching out to me for this opportunity. I think what you're doing is beautiful, and you're creating a space for us to be able to share information that people might not be able to access. And so kudos to you. I watched a couple of them already, and I'm just really honored to be here. So thank you. And that was a beautiful introduction. You're trying to make a real G cry today.
You're
But
killing it. Thank
yes,
you.
yes, yes. So emotional intelligence is very important to me because it is the foundation of so many things that we don't even realize. So if I give you a very classic textbook straight up definition, emotional intelligence is the ability to be able to recognize and engage with your own emotions as well as those of other people, right? So a lot of us get caught up in, I know myself, right? This is just me, this is just how I show up. But most times their EQ is low because it's not just about knowing yourself, it's about how you engage with other people as well. And if we think about the pioneer, one of the pioneers in his work, his name is Daniel Goldman, and his definition breaks emotional intelligence down into 4 different components, which I love to talk about. We think about them in the categories of self-awareness, which is where people usually stop. Self-awareness. Then the second piece would be self-management, where if they're a little bit more advanced, they're like, I can control myself, so I'm good. Then you go into the next category of social awareness. Now, this is where you're learning and understanding about the emotions and the impact of other people. And then relationship building or social management, which is ultimately what we want to use our EQ or to boost our emotional intelligence to be able to do, to build healthy, long lasting, trusting relationships, because humans thrive in community. And I have so many thoughts on that. So here, that's the answer to your first question. That's the definition of
Yeah.
emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I love that it went outside of I understand myself, and then that's where it stops for a lot of people because that's also where the breakdown starts, with if you have like I like the term EQ or not, right? And so I think that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is how or what are some of the warning signs, right? What are some of the warning signs of low emotional intelligence in relationships, and how can individuals work to improve that?
So I love that question because it allows us to be equipped with knowledge, right? When we know what signs to look for, then we can adjust our behaviors and our encounters with people so that we don't fall victim unintentionally. So thank you for asking that. I have one particular point that has a few sub bullet points along with that. And the biggest thing that shows up as a warning sign is distorted forms of thinking, right? This is not like a fit. The way that we think and the distortions in our mind causes us to behave different ways. And so some examples of distorted forms of thinking are black and white thinking. You have people that are like, it's either black or white. There's no gray in between, but there are billions of people on the planet and there's no way for things to just be black or white, right or wrong. So if you only have that binary thought, that is a sign or a telling sign, a warning sign of low emotional intelligence. It doesn't mean that you can't engage with that person, but that's just something that you should think about. Like, all right, so we put that in the back of our mind. Another example of a distorted form of thinking is jumping to conclusions without all of the information. You overgeneralize. You come to a quick conclusion with little evidence. An example of that is thinking that all men are the same because you've had two similar experiences, not given any like honor to the fact that there are, again, billions of men in the world and they don't all act the same, right? So that's overgeneralizing and jumping to conclusions based off of limited knowledge or limited experience. If you see somebody doing that, that's also something that you should like take heed of and be mindful of, because if they do it for somebody else, they can also do that to you, right? That's number two.
Yes.
Something else that comes up for me, and I can be guilty of this sometimes, so I have to like really be mindful of that, is having unrealistic expectations. I heard this term a long time ago. I don't know where I heard it, but I use it now in my vocabulary. To me, this is similar to shoulding all over yourself. You should do this. I should do that, right? Or
Yeah.
no, right? That just because you believe that you should doesn't mean that that is the right thing that will be happening in the moment, right? So having that unrealistic expectation, that's something to keep in mind, as well as another warning sign. And then the biggest thing that I want to leave with people as a warning sign in yourself and other people too is taking things personally. You think that the world revolves around you. You think that the person on the highway cut you off and beeped at you because they're so upset with you, or somebody said something to you in a short way, or they walked past and they didn't speak because they don't like you. No, he might not have saw you because he has so much stuff that's going on in his mind, because his child was in the hospital last night and he's trying to figure out how he's going to get out of school for the day to take care of his family. And so you ask some ways to like kind of combat these things, right? And one of the tips that I love, I wish I had one with me right now, for the taking it personal piece, is to walk around or have a Q-tip easily accessible, right? The sides of the Q-tip are soft and they're cottony, so that's gonna appeal to our physical senses. But when somebody does something to you and you feel like cut in that, you rub the ends of the Q-tip to remind you to quit taking it personal. Q-tip. You keep that as a tool on you, especially if you are somebody like me that needs to be reminded to be quick to speak, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That gives you a little bit more time between the catalyst and your response to be able to make a conscious decision on what you would want to do. And then something else that I would just encourage people to do is to lean into curiosity. Ask yourself questions or be curious about why other people are doing the things that they are doing in a way that does not paint you to be a victim. Look to understand and lean into your empathy hat. And if you don't have your empathy hat, work to develop that, so then it'll help you to not take things as personally as we tend to do as humans.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That was so good. I like that so much. You started speaking my language, talking about distorted thinking patterns. I talk about that all the time. And you know what I'll say about that is it is something everybody has a little bit of, and you either aware of it or you're not.
Yeah.
Like, I love that you even gave the example of one of the ones you struggle with. And you was like, yeah, I know this shows up for me. That's awareness. You can manage that. You know what I mean? a lot of times what people understand about those is that they come from our background, right? Like if we grew up in a community that did it this way, our families did it this way, right? This was normal for our culture, these kind of things. Then we just adapted that. It was just, it was learned behavior. It was what we know. So I like that. And yeah, something else you were saying about like when you know better, you're supposed to do better type thing. So right? It's a choice. Growth, reflection, wisdom is a choice. There are people who choose to look at opportunities that they experience as an opportunity to grow and to learn something new. And then there's people that just stay in a cycle of repeating the same things, and they can repeat them forever because when you don't grow and learn a lesson, you just gonna repeat it.
Yeah.
And so I love so much about what you said, and I really like that Q-tip analogy. It took me like 5 seconds to figure it out. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing. With, how you broke that down, do you feel like that people can't learn emotional intelligence? Is this something that people just innately have, or is this something that they can learn?
So emotional intelligence is absolutely a learned skill, right? There are some of us that are born to be more empathetic and understanding than others. We may have a natural tendency to lean into our emotions and emotional expression, and you are automatically assumed to be
Yeah.
emotionally intelligent because you display your emotions, right? You can access the range of emotions that are available to you, but that is not always the case. And so you learn skills and tools to keep in your back pocket so that when you are faced with situations that take you off your square, right, that you know how to respond to them, that you can take a moment and decide how you're going to react versus letting your emotions lead you to doing something that you might regret. A term that one of my therapists taught me as I was working through some things a couple of years ago is self-leadership, right? Many people, they don't know about the amygdala in our brain, and the amygdala's job to alert us when things might be like going crazy, right? They just know that they have this feeling, I'm angry and now I have to act on it. No, you don't. No, you don't. And so the more you learn about yourself and your makeup and the tools to be able to help you respond to difficult situations, the easier it becomes to manage yourself and the experience of others because you are learning the skills that are helping you to become more emotionally intelligent. And this is why I said earlier that it's the base of so many things that we do, because that initial understanding and awareness of yourself and how you show up in the world and how you impact other people ultimately results in harmonious relationships or being able to bounce back and increase resilience and things of that nature. So yes, it is absolutely a learned skill. Now, whether that is through direct instruction, like what we're doing right now, if you're listening to us on the podcast and I'm telling you the 4 components and how to be aware, or life experience, like you said earlier, you're going to learn how to do it. So an example that's coming up for me is children. I have 2. My oldest is 16. My youngest is 7. Well, no, she's 9 now. And one of the things that came up for us, I remember I'm like, Catherine, you used to talk to me like so much, right, beforehand. One of the things that she told me that happened years ago that I didn't even know, I'm just operating in my regular Black momdom, like, oh my gosh, I need some time to decompress. Like, all right, y'all. She told me something and I ignored her. She thought I ignored her. I didn't really hear what she was saying because I was trying to do all the other things, but I ignored her. And that taught her not to communicate with me about certain things because it doesn't matter to me, when that's not how I feel. But it was a learned experience for her because in that moment she needed to be heard, she wanted something to be expressed to me, and I kind of like brushed it out of the way. So I think it's important for us to keep those things in mind.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. Like you and your daughter were able to have that conversation, and you were receptive of her feedback because I think that requires emotional intelligence. I think for some of us, we come from the culture, the generation of kids, emotions don't matter, or, parents, they may not have time to have these kind of relationships, emotional relationships with their children. And so you just navigate the world trying to figure out your emotions, and sometimes they're not the healthiest ways. And you are
Okay.
like, oh my gosh, I maybe dropped the ball there, and that wasn't my intention, and I want to be more aware of that. I thought that was huge, and I think that's something that as a parent, I love, right? I love that we can be accountable. I love that we can be intentional. I love that we can recognize that, we're not always perfect either. Like,
Mhm.
even with our greatest intentions and efforts, we still make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We're human.
For sure, and
Um,
that's what I was gonna say too. If when my baby sees this, I don't want her to, "Mommy, I don't have it all together. I still get it messed up sometimes, but I am conscious
sure.
of it, and I work to be aware and make better decisions even if I don't get them right every time." So,
Yeah, I'll apologize because if I'm like, well, I think you did this, and then later realize you didn't, I'm like, I was wrong. And I should not have accused you or blamed you for that. And so that's responsible.
for
And then
sure.
hopefully I learn from that. So I don't do that over and over again. Because kids are smart and emotionally they will respond to what you're giving them.
Yes.
Um, and I love what you said about like helping people understand how the brain responds to trauma and stress, because the amygdala is our stress kind of threat center. And so it
Mhm.
does lead to like where we get more impulsive and we don't always think rationally. And, sometimes we're in protection mode or survival mode. And so I love that you explained that, speaking my language again, in such an educator, right? Like just helping people understand that there are things that can explain this, which I think is huge because
Yeah.
sometimes when you're going through something, it just seems foreign. And it's like, well, people go through this, but when you can like attach some kind of explanation to it, a meaning behind it, it can help normalize it. It can help bring some insight to it. And it can give you options and how you want to navigate that because now, oh, this
Mhm.
is a thing, right? And I'm
Yep.
not alone in this experience. So I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Words are ways that they help us to understand ourselves and how to make sense of the world in general. So when we have access to language to articulate ourselves, to be able to explain what is going on in here, it's empowering because
Mhm.
now I'm able to communicate something that I didn't even know was a thing. It was just a feeling that was living inside of me, but now I can tell you specifically what's going on and advocate for myself in the things that I need. So,
Absolutely. And I know this is like, emotional intelligence, like you said, is a learned journey. And so, like, when people are, whether they're in the beginning of that journey, they are not in that journey yet, but
yeah.
they're struggling with emotional intelligence, what advice would you give them in, being able to apply emotional intelligence to relationships?
The first thing that comes up for me is the way that dominant culture views us. We have been conditioned to look at ourselves like machines, right? That we're supposed to be able to go on and on and on to accomplish and achieve this and this and this. And we are not machines. We are human beings with thoughts,
Yeah.
feelings, capacity, all these things that many people do not consider. So the first piece of that advice that I would give is for us to give ourselves grace. Number one, you're going to hear me say that a
Yeah.
lot today, to give ourselves grace because we are not human. I mean, we are human and not machines. And also because we're not the only person that's struggling in this area. When I
Yeah.
learned about the amygdala, this is when I first started my teacher leadership journey, like way back. I think this was like 2018, 2019. I was on a team called Change Agents, and I was looking to help improve restorative practices at my school. And so we started reading a book by Elena Aguilar called The Art of Coaching Teams. And she always begins her work with know yourself, understanding emotions, because if you cannot do that, there's no way that you're going to be able to have the impact that you're hoping to accomplish with the people that you're working with. And there was this blurb in the book about the amygdala and like its role in alerting you and being a messenger of the things that are happening around you. And it was like my brain opened. I'm like, wait, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not, I'm not
Right.
crazy out here. It's not something that I need to change within myself. Why I feel all these big, and it just that opened up a door to learning more about emotional intelligence, and also like skyrocketed my ability to be able to lead and accelerated my journey in this educational industry right now. So I would encourage you, number one, to give yourself grace. The second thing I would ask people to do is to learn about what emotions are and what they are not. Emotions are simply physiological, so it's how you feel physically, cognitive, what's happening inside of your brain, and behavioral, the actions that you engage in. They're just responses to some type of event that is prompting these behaviors. So it is not a definition of your character. It is not a way of being. It is not this X or this cross that you have to have on your back. It is simply an experience that is a response to an event that is occurring. So knowing what they are and what they are not will empower you to be able to decide how you want to react in the moment. And then the third thing that I would encourage people to do is to reflect on your own feelings about emotions in order to identify what perspectives you need to shift. Because if I look at emotions as a bad thing, oh, expressing emotions is weak, I'm not doing that. Crying, absolutely not. Like, there's no space for emotions in business. Then that is going to impact the way that I show up when they happen. There can be time frames when I'm meeting with somebody and there's a power struggle and they make me upset. Ooh, I cannot feel this feeling, so let me push it away, and I'm going to diminish myself and potentially damage the relationship. So it's important to understand how you view emotions as well, so that you can engage with them in a healthy way.
Wow. I think that whole explanation, the whole explanation should just be like on a megaphone over and over again, because you said so much that was like, it needs to be said. I think that was huge. Like, your feelings are not your character, and you're supposed to have a range of feelings, and you are human. And sometimes we are the only ones that can validate our own feelings and reflect on those. And so definitely, right, embrace that instead of feeling like you got to push it away. Pushing it away does a couple of things. First of all, it transfers over to other situations. So the way I'm silencing myself or my feelings in this space is going to show up in other spaces, right? Outside of maybe, it's happening professionally, now it's happening personally. It's happening in this role, it's happening in that role. But also, it don't actually go away. It just maybe manifests in a different way. And so that's how sometimes people have those disruptive or impulsive kind of responses, because it's almost like shaking up a can of soda. Like,
Yeah.
you supposed to like, kind of crack it and let it like seep out some of that carbonation, but you just over there shaking it up like, no, I can't deal with it. No, I can't deal with it. Then over time, something gonna happen, and that thing just gonna just come out, all crazy and wild and make a mess. And so
And let me give a shout out to my Detroit or Midwest people. When she said soda, she meant pop, y'all. She meant pop. She meant
I
pop.
know I'm trying to be all universal. Yes, pop. You know what I mean? Right. Midwest, we know it's pop. I think
Absolutely.
deep south they say cold drink, so it's like,
Or
but
cola or something. Yeah.
yeah. So I love that you said that and brought attention to that, right? Like, and there's ways you can release that in different ways, but it definitely helps enhance if you're on the healing journey of growth, right? It definitely improves your emotional intelligence to connect more with what you're actually feeling,
Yeah.
cope with those feelings, have ways to redirect those in healthy ways instead of saying, well, nope, I don't supposed to have that feeling, so I'm just gonna tuck that away until next time. Um, because it doesn't really go away. It just turns into something else. I
For
love that.
sure.
And I know you mentioned, how emotional intelligence has been showing up in your children. I think that's amazing. Because, right, we are raising our little people to be grown-ups and to be able to manage their emotions. And so how would you say emotional intelligence contributes to building strong and lasting parent-child relationships?
Here comes that term grace again, because it is absolutely needed, specifically in that
Mhm.
parent-child space. There are a couple of my coworkers call these things that I say domisms, because I have these
I
terms
like that.
that I've coined, that like help me to move throughout life. One of the things that I tell new parents or like my friends in general that are parents, it is difficult to discipline the you out of your child. And so having emotional intelligence allows you to give yourself grace. It also allows you to give your child grace and model healthy responses for them instead of perpetuating that generational trauma that you have experienced, right? It allows you to be able to shift the narrative and create whole, loved, physically able people to be able to
Mm,
do the things that they need to do, right? It also helps us to realize that our emotions are just messengers, and they give us the ability to dissect, what is happening in that message and determine how we're going to respond. And so I think that people, terms that are coming up for me that are like buzzwords right now, that some people, especially in our Black community, like shy away from: gentle parenting, conscious parenting, things like that, right? Being a
yes.
gentle or a conscious parent is not being soft or
Mm,
weak-minded when it comes to taking care of your children or raising your children. It is you taking a step back and managing and engaging with your own emotions instead of just raising little army members where you are their drill
yeah.
sergeant and you tell them what to do and then you consequence them when they don't do exactly what you have said. And so I can speak so passionately about this because I am still learning as I go. I'm building a plan as I fly it. My children, especially my
Hmm.
oldest daughter, she's like, Mom, when I was little, you weren't like this, the way that you are with Eva. You, because I was 23, baby. I was 23 when I first had you, and I was growing up myself. So now you get to experience a mommy in your teenage years that is more emotionally mature and cares about what you're saying and realizes that she's not raising objects
Yes.
to be able
Yeah.
to put out in the world. I was given these children. God gave them to me to help nourish them in the way that He wants to use them, not how I think they should show up in the world. And emotional intelligence and being able to understand that helps me to be able to do exactly what He is calling me to do for them. Do I get it right all the time? No, but do I try? Yes. Sometimes do I not try? That's right too. But at least I'm making a conscious choice in that moment and I can go back and clean up the mess that I made because I didn't have capacity to continue to try at that time.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm a gentle parent. Shout out to gentle parenting and, just conscious parenting in that way, breaking cycles, learning new tools and embracing them to raise healthier people. I love that. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not really to say that this is the right way and another way is wrong, just to say like this way works better for me. And like you said, allows me to be more in tune with my emotions. And I really, really love what you kind of how you kicked this off, where you talked about like we cannot discipline the me out of our kids. Because if you, because I mean, I'm hearing like empathy, compassion, understanding, right? Awareness, because if you recognize like yourself, you remember what you were like as a kid, you can like a lot of times see that in your kids. You're like, oh my gosh, she is over there running right now, and I remember when I used to do that and I was her age.
Yeah.
And instead of being mad at her, like she is sorting through in a part of her emotions that she doesn't understand how to handle that. How can
Mm-hmm.
I be supportive to that? How can I take a pause, right? Because I know, like this morning, I went up to my daughter's room. I said, "Oh, your room should never look like this. It's kind of terrible. I want to take your phone right now." And she's like, "Please
Mm-hmm.
don't." So then, instead of just being like consequence, because she know, but I say I'm gonna give you a couple of hours, right? Because I want to give you a chance to navigate that. And I didn't even want her to feel like it's just I just have to have a reaction to what I don't want in order to, communicate things. I want you to be able to articulate yourself. I want you to feel like there's options, there's some support. Of course, there are times where, you just may have to do things that you're not
For
wanting to
sure.
do in those moments. But I do want to kind of give a little bit of grace as I'm navigating that path, not only for myself, but also for them. So that they can understand that, as adults, these are the same things we're doing. So I want to be able to extend that to you.
For
I
sure.
love that so much.
For sure. Something
Um,
that just came up for me when you said
yeah.
that is when we are aware of our emotions and those of other people as well, it could potentially remove or decrease the amount of damage that's done in parent-child relationships because now the punishment will match the crime. We're not punishing them or consequencing them because of how upset they made us. So now I have to invoke this harsh consequence on you to teach you a lesson. I am now able to navigate, right? I see your behavior. I understand there's a variety of consequences that I can choose from, and I'm going to choose the one that aligns with what you did so that we can then restore our relationship afterwards instead of continually making it go on the downward spiral. So I love
Absolutely.
that. Your disposition is also much more gentle than mine. I'm like, yeah, I would never say I'm a gentle parent. I'm a conscious parent, but not a gentle parent. I'm like, oh, give me some of that
Yeah.
warmth, girl. Give me some of that.
I think the biggest thing that I wanted to change in my parenting was corporal punishment
Oh
as a
yeah.
response to discipline or as a like form of discipline. That was definitely very present. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. And so then, I didn't even know what it was. I just knew I was like, I'm not using the belt, I'm not doing that. And over time, learning, like why I care about having certain conversations and giving my kids opportunities to express themselves emotionally and all of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I said, oh, there's a whole kind of movement around this and there's tools with this. And so learning it and just being resourceful in that way has been huge. And I appreciate that you mentioned that in like a journey of emotional intelligence with children. But yeah, I definitely think there are multiple ways to parent and be successful
Yes.
in it and have a lot of great things come out. And it's really kind of up to different individuals to be thoughtful, emotionally aware, and how they are transitioning their the things that they're carrying into their parenthood.
100.
Um, well, how do you feel like individuals can recognize and manage their own emotions effectively?
That's a big question because we're talking about a lot of things that are happening in your mind, right?
Mhm.
And I remember there was a situation that I was in with some people that were close to me, and I'm like, I'm telling you, in this role, you want to be respected as a leader, but you are not managing your emotions. You're not. It's important for you to manage these things as they come up. And what she said to me, she cried and she said, how I'm trying, I recognize, but what am I supposed to do? And I think that is a step that is missing in a lot of like self-help books or even like podcasts or people who are just sharing information because they tell you the outcome of what's supposed to happen, but they're not talking about the process in order for you to get there. So thank you for that
Yes.
question.
Yes.
We talked about this a little bit before, but the first thing that I think is important is to learn about emotions, right? So we talked about learning what they are and what they are not. An easy thing that you can do is to download what's called a feelings wheel, and it will allow you to be able to name the emotions that you experience and be intentional about how you respond to them. So oftentimes we'll ask people, how are you feeling? They'll say, oh, I'm good. Or like in
Yeah.
a situation, they'll say, well, I'm angry because anger is the easiest emotion to be able to access in that moment. It's like the tip of the iceberg. But really what may be
Yeah.
under the surface is hurt feelings because you feel betrayed because somebody did something that you would have never thought them that they would be able to do, or you feel lonely or anxious, and those are not easy to express because they require you to be vulnerable. But
Mhm.
anger, you're on the defense, right? I'm defending
Yeah.
myself. I'm not going to let you treat me any type of way. And it's
Uh-huh.
easy to express. So learn about the emotions, be able to name them, download the feelings wheel, practice understanding how they show up in your body so that you know how to respond. And then that's increasing the first component that we talked about earlier of self-awareness so that you can learn how to manage yourself in those situations. The second thing that I would do is to tell you to take some time to reflect because reflection is a gift. And one of the reasons why I wrote the container, here, right? It allows you some time to sit with the feelings that you have had and write about them, express them in a safe space that you don't have to worry about people throwing them back in your face. So
Mhm.
journaling, I would recommend meditation. I would
Yes.
recommend reflective conversations with people that you trust. And that doesn't have to
Mhm.
be a therapist because I do recommend that. That's my third point, to get external help from a therapist or a coach or a psychiatrist in the event that you might need a little extra support with some medicine, because that's not bad.
Mhm.
But to go back to those reflective conversations with people that you trust, you can go to your homegirl or best guy friend or something and say, this is what happened and this is how I responded. Can you tell me what you thought about that?
Yeah.
How did I show up in this situation? Such and such said that I fly off the handle, or that I don't let go of things. Do you think that to be true about me? Right? Because oftentimes we have blinders on and we can't see past our own noses in those situations where our amygdala is flipped. Here we go again with the amygdala. So get in community. The enemy, and I don't want to preach, but the enemy wants us to be in isolation away from other people, because in community is where we thrive and we flourish. So connect to somebody that you can trust and who you know loves you, and ask them to give you an evaluation about how you're showing up in the world, and see how that is a gift that will help you to move forward in managing your emotions.
Wow, yes. Man, it's like you be over here just in my brain and we just like there's so many shared beliefs in this space and I appreciate you for saying that. I'm about to give you a mic, you are preaching.
Come on, man, look,
Because look,
she ready.
okay? Yes, oh my gosh, you be cracking me up.
Sitting at my
Yes,
desk. Sitting at my desk is here.
right? So what was one of them? So like having a safe person to talk to and trust, like that is a part of that vulnerability journey, because vulnerability requires you to want to open up about things. It's sensitive, but there is risk in opening up about those things, and you want to be able to talk to somebody who you feel safe talking to,
Yes.
essentially. So usually that does involve trust and those kind of things. It's something else she said, and I am going a little blank, but I just can't, I don't know, ignore it. So I'm like, who was, or go past it, because I was like, it was so important. Um,
We talked about the
what was
feelings
it?
wheel. We talked about
Yeah,
journal.
the feelings will. That was it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
because when you talked about like the iceberg, right? Like there's this version of our feelings that everybody generally can see and be aware of, and then there's so much under there. But anger, a lot of people like go to anger as a defense mechanism. It's, a lot of times related to those distorted thinking patterns, all of that. Anger is secondary. Like anger is almost never the first emotion that you're feeling. It is a response to another emotion. And so I
Yeah.
loved how you broke that down. You was like, it might be hurt. It might be embarrassment. It might be, right? Like all of these different things. And then your response to it is, I'm going to use anger. I'm going to let that be kind of the
Yeah.
guide and defense emotional response. But in actuality, if I deal with the core feeling, if I'm dealing with, like rejection or loneliness or whatever, that is where the healing is going to really take place and be
Mhm.
successful and sustainable at. Because we can learn how to respond to anger, but if we're not dealing with that other stuff, we just gonna replace it with something else.
Mhm.
So I love that. I really appreciate you going into talking about that with emotional intelligence and just understanding that there's a range of emotions. Because
For
like
sure.
a lot of people don't think about that. They're just like, I'm good or I'm not. And
Yeah.
it's like, but there's so much more, right? We can be
Absolutely.
we can have good and not so good feelings at the same time, and that's
Yeah.
kind of okay, right? That
Yes.
makes you human.
Yeah. Absolutely. Two
So
things can
so
coexist.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that emotional intelligence definitely shows up. We talked about in parenthood, in relationships. It can be even close relationships, which we'll get into, but also it influences our ability to, or should I say, it can influence our ability to respond to different needs of others. And so
Oh
when we
yeah.
think about, I would think maybe the relationship with elderly parents, right, that are aging. How would you say emotional intelligence um, can influence our ability to understand and respond to them?
Girl, you just that's a amazing question, and it just made me a little emotional. I think about where we are in our age group, right? You just celebrated a milestone birthday. Mine is coming up in September. And the when we're young, we just see our parents as parents. We don't see our
Hmm.
parents as people, right? But the older you get, you realize that your parent is just a person that was doing the best that they can, trying to raise you and navigate life with all the things that are coming, their way. And so the topic of parents as they age is one that is kind of fresh for me, but also important to navigate, because you think about your parents and the fact that they have been the person that is in control for your whole life. And now
Mhm.
they get to this age, to this point where they have to relinquish some of that control to potentially you, the person who they used to control. Right? That's difficult. That is difficult. It
Yeah.
is hard for us to go to a restaurant and not even get what we specifically asked for without blowing up on the waiter or the waitress. So imagine relinquishing control of your life over to someone else, regardless of
Mm.
how much you trust them. So I think the importance that emotional intelligence plays here is the same role that it plays in your parent-child relationship, right? It increases your empathy, and that is what leads to understanding instead of being frustrated. Mama, I know what's best. I'm telling you, you don't even know. You're not caught up with the trends and what's happening. I'm telling you what's best. And then now you have this power struggle, right? If you were able to lean into your emotional intelligence, you would understand where they're coming from, where they're coming from. You would understand their perspective, and your understanding will make it easier for you to share your perspective with them, because you're coming at them from a place of empathy and curiosity, and not one of judgment and you following my
Yes.
rules because this is what I'm supposed to do. Those parent dynamics, authoritative type relationships, are difficult to navigate when the roles switch, but they are necessary. And so I think it's really important for us to be able to tap into that EQ and boost our EQ, because then we go on to that third component that I talked about of social awareness and social management. We understand
Yeah.
how we impact that person and how we're showing up for them and how we're making them respond to us. And so with that level of understanding, you can adjust how you behave. You can maybe ask if they would want to do X, Y, and Z, instead of telling them that this is exactly what they do, because you are what they need to do, because you are respecting who they are as an adult and their authoritative figure in your life, while also offering them an opportunity to be able to access something that they might not be able to typically access. So I think it's a big deal. I watch my
Yeah.
friends go through this, especially with parents as they are like embarking upon some of these degenerative ailments like Alzheimer's, or like
Mhm.
the forgetfulness that may come with the regular aging, and they're not able to do certain things that they're typically doing. And now you're upset because my mama typically sends me this, or she's typically able to
Yes.
do, but she can't anymore. And if you understand that, you can support her, because she probably feels bad for not being able to do the stuff that she was able to do too. So I can be
Yeah.
on the soapbox about this, but I'm gonna be quiet because we don't got that much time.
Yeah. No, I think that was amazing. And one of the things that stood out was that, like, how you kicked it off. You say, like, seeing your parents beyond your parents, right? Like,
Mm,
these are human. These are, like, my mom was a woman who had her own struggles, traumas, all of that before she was my mom. And
correct.
I think, like, when you're young, right, like, your tunnel vision view of your mom is she's my mom, and everything she does revolves around me and protecting me and all of that. And so when she doesn't get it right, then it's just like, I'm just gonna deal with that. And then as you grow and mature and heal, do different, types of work, right? Then I can I can open up my perspective, and I could see different layers to her, and build empathy and understanding to her journey, and how, even though I was affected, right, like that, well, she wasn't just my mom, and she did not wake up or was born this perfect person to be my mom. And also, like the understanding and compassion and communicating, like putting yourself in that other person's shoes to consider their perspective, instead of, like, um, I want to call digging your heels in on your point, right? Like, because sometime it's not really like the fight with them. I feel like sometimes that's the fight with yourself, right? Like, I gotta prove something in some way, and if you put yourself in their shoes and consider their perspective, it might actually be another way to explain that, or take a step back and honor that without, making this you versus me dynamic. And so I really
Absolutely.
like that too. Um, and it's challenging because I know, like, when you on it, sometimes you don't recognize it. You really do have to pause, and you really aren't excited in those moments. You might even be a little frustrated, but through reflection, right, through patience, through grace, the word grace, right, it can be really rewarding to know that I'm showing the character traits that I want to show in the most difficult moments, or I'm challenging myself to move through what I feel like is right or what I want to do
Yeah.
versus right considering this space or this other person. So I really appreciate that you spoke on that. You speak on so many wonderful things. I just
Thank
appreciate it
you.
all. I was like
Thank
about
you.
to throw another mic at you.
Something that
Oh,
just came up for me real quick as you were chatting, that the increasing your emotional intelligence understands or helps you to understand how you can support yourself too as you are supporting your elderly aging parent, recognizing that you need an outlet to be able to express that range of emotion that you'll be feeling, right? Because frustration is something that you name that will come up, but also sadness and grief, right? Where's my
mm,
mom? Where's my dad? They're not the same, and that means that they are approaching end of life, and oh my gosh, what am I going to do then? So if you're harboring all of that stuff on the inside and don't recognize that, you won't realize you need an outlet, a safe space, like we talked about, a journal or a
right.
therapist or any of those things. So I think it also helps us to not only support them, but to support ourselves too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so much for saying that because yeah, we navigate different complex emotions as they're
Yeah.
aging and changing.
Yes.
And that's so
Yes.
true. So, we're gonna move into more relationship stuff. I would like to ask you to discuss the connection between emotional intelligence and effective communication in romantic relationships.
Okay, so let's talk about that one because that's probably what everybody was caring about anyway. Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier. Emotional intelligence, EQ, is the foundation of trusting relationships. It's also the foundation of building a lasting partnership or being able to collaborate with somebody, being able to be flexible and compromise, and also knowing when and how to assert yourself when needed, because I think that many people get into relationships and change themselves. They change themselves. They want to submit in a way that is not healthy. Submission on both parts, I think, is important for compromise and being able to grow together as one. But now I have been single for 20, 30 years, and I like who I've become, but I get with you and I have to put that person to the side because it doesn't seem to align with who you want me to be or who I need to be for you in this moment. And so I think that having
Wow.
a heightened level of emotional intelligence will allow you to be able to communicate, baby, I understand where you're coming from, but this is how it impacts me in a way that is not harsh and aggressive. You can be assertive without being aggressive. And I think that is I know it's a challenge that I have faced and I've been actively working on over the years, but it's something that we all engage in and don't even realize it. And so if
Yeah.
we go into like the different components, that self-awareness, if you understand yourself and how you
Mhm.
show up, you'll be able to communicate that clearly to your partner so they can understand how you show up in the aspects of yourself. Two, it'll help you to be able to manage yourself and your responses in difficult situations, because one thing that I've learned is that some things about yourself you don't recognize until you get into partnership with somebody. Because
Yeah.
while you're alone, you can tend to the things that you know. I know I need to make sure that I watch my or manage my anger, or I may
Yeah.
be too emotionally expressive and bleed out on people who don't cut me. So, like, these are things that I'm aware of about myself. But now, here I am aligning myself with somebody new, and there's a part in them from their childhood or their life experience that I've never experienced before. So, hey,
Right.
amygdala. Oh, now we're in trouble, and like there it is. And now I'm showing up as this big, ferocious beast because I don't know how to manage my response to them. My feelings are so big and I got to let them out. And so I think it helps us to be able to navigate different or difficult situations and resolve conflict many of our relationships end prematurely, and that is romantic, platonic, and familial spaces, all of that, because we don't know how to resolve conflict and we expect everything to be roses and lilies and happy-go-lucky all the time, and that is not true of the human experience. You wouldn't want to be expected to be happy and joyful all the time, and so you can't expect your partner to be that. And so I don't think that we can navigate conflict resolution without having some sense, even if it's not like very strong, some sense of emotional intelligence, because otherwise you're going to take things personally because you don't have that Q-tip in your pocket to remind you of that. You're going to think that things are either black or white and you have no space for gray. We hear that. I don't have no space for gray. It's either I know where I stand or I don't. That's not realistic.
Oh,
It's not
yeah,
realistic at
there's so
all.
much
And so
gray.
yes, so
Yeah,
much gray, so much gray. So I think that's a basis of how it helps in romantic relationships, because it helps you to understand yourself and the person that you're trying to align your life with, and also whether or not that is a space that you should be in. Because you can part peacefully because
it's
my
true.
parts don't align well with your parts, and that doesn't make you a bad person. That just means that we're not compatible. And I don't hate you. We just need to be in different spaces, because otherwise you're gonna hate me. So I need to get out of here.
Right. Yeah, I love that part in a, mutual way, because a lot of times it does feel like, oh, so I know some people's default is something has to break for this to like, for a big change to happen. And it's like, no, you can make a choice.
Yes.
You can be active in leading that transition, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be broken. It doesn't have to be wrong. It doesn't have to be bad, right? It doesn't have to be a big thing. But something huge you said, and you said this earlier, and I wanted to touch on this because I think it's important, is that piece of self-awareness that people miss is that I think the piece that's obvious is the internal awareness, right? Like we understand what we're doing and what we're, perceiving and what our intentions are and all of that. But the part that I think people miss is the external awareness where
Yeah.
sometimes, and I think you mentioned it perfectly earlier, he was like, we have blinders on, we have blind spots. There are things we absolutely cannot see in ourselves. And sometimes that definitely comes up. It can come up in any relationship, to be honest,
Mhm.
but romantic relationships, you definitely gonna see some stuff that you ain't see in yourself. You like,
For
oh,
sure.
I do that, or I did that, or I made somebody feel that way and I didn't even know it, right? And that's a part of emotional intelligence, because if you only look at internal self-awareness, you are going to miss the blind spots.
Yes.
So I thought that
Yes.
was amazing. Thank you for mentioning that.
For sure.
And I like I think there's a double-edged sword with this, but I'm gonna say what I like about it first. I think that in the world we're in now, where you have access to so much information, it's so many opportunities to learn and grow and, gain information and opinions and all of that kind of stuff. On the other end of that same sword, it's like there's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of things that are not accurate out there and that are leading, right, some certain conversations. And so I want to dig into, if you don't mind, some of the common misconceptions about emotional intelligence and its impact on relationship dynamics.
Hmm. That's a spicy question. I love that. I think I am big on language. So you may have noticed even today, there are time frames in which I can speak quickly, but then there'll be time frames in which I slow down because I want to be intentional about the words that I'm using and make sure
Mhm.
that they are articulating what I mean for them to, right? So the first thing that comes up for me as a common misconception about emotions in general is that they are either good or bad.
Yeah.
That's not true. Emotions are not good or bad, they just are. And as we talked about
Yes.
before, emotions are messengers that are you engage in based on an experience. So if something happened to you and it made you feel a comfortable emotion like joy or happiness, we're easier or more willing to engage in those and call those good because it makes us feel comfortable versus something
Mhm.
that happens to us and it makes us feel hurt or betrayed or what is the word I'm thinking about? Depressed, right? Those are uncomfortable emotions and nobody for real likes to lean into discomfort. But in order
Mhm.
to be a leader in this space, to be exhibiting self-leadership, you learn to engage with your emotions and understand the message that they are telling you. I'm angry about this because I don't like how this person behaved. Let me communicate about what happened so that they can have a clear understanding of what I am able to tolerate and what I'm not. And then I communicate that, I allow them to make a choice, and then I choose how I'm going to respond in that situation. That's maturity, right? Emotional maturity. I pray to God every day to help me to exhibit that and continue to be an emotional intelligence expert. What I don't or didn't realize was all of the chaos that would come to have me practice that, because you can't be an expert at something without practice. Okay. So I get lots of
Absolutely.
practice, right? Which is where a lot of this wisdom comes from. But the most important, one of the key important things that we need to remember is that emotions just are. They are not good or bad. What's good or bad is how we respond to them. We can
Yeah.
choose to have a positive response where it's going to be about restoration or identifying solutions, or we could choose to pop off. You can choose your action, but you don't get to choose the consequence of it. So that's the thing that we have to keep in mind. That's number one. And then the second thing that I think is a common misconception is that how we feel today or how we feel in this moment is how we're always going to feel about a certain situation. And that's not true, because
Yeah.
emotions are temporary. If you sit with your feelings and you feel them all the way through to completion, you'll notice that some things may last an hour or even a day or whatever. But when you release them, they're gone and you have the capacity to be able to see something in a different way. So just because I felt love and joy today doesn't mean that I'll feel that tomorrow. Or just because I felt anger and sadness today doesn't mean that that's something that is going to be continual in this experience that I'm in.
Yeah, I love that because I know we spent some time earlier talking about how, we want to access and honor our emotions and validate them. And in this way, the way you explain them, it's like you explain how you have ownership over your emotions, how your emotions don't own you, right? Or somebody else doesn't own your emotions, right? People are not making you feel these things, or your emotions are not driving what you wanting to do or not do. Like, you get to kind of make a choice and acknowledge that, like, moments I'm gonna have some emotions that may make it a struggle a little bit, but I still have things that I have chosen to do, which helps me choose how I want to respond to those emotions. So I thought that was amazing because, I mean, to be honest, that's how successful people can be successful. Because if we just
Yes.
depended on our emotions, there's a lot of days I wouldn't get out of bed. 'Cause I'm like, I just want to sit here and watch TV all day, or I just want to, and then once I get up and get going, I'm like, okay, I feel good. I'm ready for what I'm supposed to be doing or what I planned, right? So I appreciate that level of ownership over the emotions.
For sure.
Um, are there any specific strategies or exercises that you can recommend that can allow us to enhance our emotional intelligence?
Yes. The first thing that comes to mind when we think about strategies is something that is natural to us, but I don't think we do it enough, and it's deep breathing. When you are able to control your breath, it regulates your nervous system after, right? That amygdala has flipped, and it allows you to be able to be intentional in interrupting the emotional cycle. Many of us don't even understand the cycle of an emotion. If you invite me to come back, I can talk more about that, right? But we have the ability to interrupt. There are 6 stages of an emotional cycle, and with that awareness, we are able to interrupt at different parts. And so when you are regulating your breath, it tells your nervous system everything is okay. We don't have to be in flight or fight mode. You don't have to
Yes.
defend yourself in this moment, right? I can take a deep breath. I can do some circle breathing, and then that will allow me to take that beat and expand that response time between catalyst and action. One of the things that I learned that is important to keep in mind about breathing is that it's about the exhale and the release. So you're going to inhale, but your exhale should be much longer. So if I count for 4 with my inhale, I should be exhaling for 8. And then that is what we will, that's when you'll be able to feel the difference physically in the regulation of your nervous system. So keep that in mind, deep breathing. We also talked a little bit about journaling. And I'm not just going to continue to say that because I wrote a journal or published a journal, but because of the gift that it gives you in reflection. It allows you to be able to sit down and express everything. You get all of your thoughts out, whether it is big scary feelings and you want to write all the cuss words that immediately come up for you. You got a place to put them in, and then you can sit through all of that to find out what the root of the actual problem is. I'm not mad because of the way that he said those things to me. I'm mad because he's not considering me as a human being. And if he
Yeah.
considered me as a human being, then my response might be different to that. But I had to get through all of those initial big scary emotional feelings that were happening in that moment to be able to get to the root of the challenge. So those two things we said: deep breathing first with a longer exhale. Journaling is the second thing that we just mentioned. And then the third thing I kind of touched a little bit on, but it is called feeling your feelings all the way through to completion, right?
Yeah.
Identifying where they are showing up in your body and releasing them in a way that allows you to let them escape. So some things that I read about this in there's a book called The 15 Traits of Conscious Leadership, and one of the things that they tell you to do is about the release. So you make animal sounds, or you do a release that aligns with the feeling. So sometimes if I'm by myself and I need to, or even with somebody, I might hiss, right, to get it out, or if you need to scream, or if you need to like bang on something. Or they have these rooms now called rage rooms, where it's like things in there that you can just go and let out all that aggression. Some people do it through working out. I do it through dance and yoga. Like there are lots of ways to release them, but you don't want to push them down because they don't like that. I think it's important for us to look at our emotions as characters or visitors that are coming to us with a message. And if they show up, if you had a visitor in real life show up at your door with an important message to tell you, you wouldn't try to manage them quickly and say, "Hey, give me what you got, go away. I don't want to deal with any of that. Get out of my face right now." You would engage with them. You would ask them questions about, well, what is the message that you're trying to tell me? Where did this come from? Like, do you want me to keep it and hold on to it? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I think that is one of the keys to understanding emotional intelligence and also being able to operate in it by changing the language or the way that we think about emotions. They're not meant to be controlled or even managed. They are meant to be engaged with because they serve a purpose, and we have to identify what the purpose is. So something that can be helpful in learning how to engage with your emotions too is watching the movie Inside Out. You ever saw that? Inside Out?
I love that movie. I need to see part 2 because I know they added a new emotion to that one. So I'm like,
Yes. And I think that movie is beautiful. I show it when I'm doing this
I
kind of
love
work
that
with
movie.
kids, but also adults, because it is a tangible depiction of how emotions operate, and it allows you to be able to see them as parts within you instead of just like a whole. I am an angry person, or I'm an emotional being. No, you're not. You are a human that has the range of emotions like we talked about, and you experience these parts that dictate how you show up in the world. So those are my 3. Feel your feelings all the way
Oh
through
my
to
gosh.
completion, journal, and deep breathe.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I love that example you gave about somebody comes to the door, you're just gonna be like, go away, right? Because sometimes that's how we treat ourselves. Like if that emotion comes up, we like, go away. So I love how you explained that. And I want to ask you this because I know that you spoke a lot about like how you want to follow that emotion all the way through and let it release out of your body. Can you lightly touch on what happens when you choose to keep holding emotions in? Like what does that do to your body over time in your lifespan?
You already know the answer to that, but you just want me to say it out loud for the people,
I'm
right?
just,
Yeah.
we always
Yes.
in the same thought process.
Yes. So when you hold on to it, it tends to show up in other areas that we might not recognize. Some easy indicators are irritability, anxiety, and depression, because it's showing up, it's seeping out in you because you are not intentionally expressing it. It can also show up as physical ailments, right? Within your joints, particularly in your hips. because a lack of emotional in your body, and it shows up as physical pain. The physical pain we talked about the cognitive expression where it just kind of seeps out. It impacts your relationships in ways that you don't know because you have an unintentional guard up and people are not able to penetrate that. So it can result in you being dismissed from communities that you really want to be a part of, right?
Yeah.
So lots of things can happen when you harbor them because they're gonna come out. That's the thing that people
Yep.
need to realize. Even if you decide not to intentionally express them, emotions are living things, living pieces of you, and they will not be ignored. So they will
Yes.
show up in the variety of ways that I shared earlier. But there are also some other things you can see: hair loss,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
wrinkles in your
Yep.
skin, right? Lots of things happen. So as well,
Thank you
express
so
yourself,
much
guys.
for explaining that because I think that's the hidden part that people don't realize is that these are manifesting. Like some of these disorders are not new and oh, this situation caused this. These are manifestations of these living emotions that you've been tucking away. And
Mhm.
some of the most like common ailments, like you talk about anxiety, trauma, depression are results of that, but also things like body pains,
Yes.
heart disease, right? Autoimmune diseases, right? Like all of
Um,
these things are connected, and to emotional, like lacking addressing your emotional difficulties, pushing things down that you think,
yes.
oh, I'll have to deal with that. Like your body dealing with it in some
Yeah.
way, in one form or another, relationship, all of these areas. I really appreciate you saying that. I also like when you touched on being able to do the deep breathing so that when you have those stress responses happening with the amygdala, how you can, kind of get into the prefrontal cortex and be calm and make rational decisions and understand consequences and feel like, okay, I have a choice in what happens next and not just I got to react to that threat, kind of going off in my brain. I love that. Deep
Yes.
breathing is so important. And journaling.
Yes.
Journaling is huge because one of the things that I love about journaling, and I always am an advocate for journaling, is that you don't know what's gonna come out until you put that pen to paper. You think, oh, I'm writing about this, and so much more comes out. You don't realize that maybe I was angry when I started writing this, and now I'm understanding by the time I end it, or maybe I was this when I started it, but then I started drawing stuff, and I connected with another part of me that just needed a creative outlet. And so, y'all, she got the journal out. Get it. Tell us where to get your journal. Tell us how to find you. Tell us where we can connect with you at because I love everything you talked about today and appreciate you for being here sharing it.
Thank you so much. Again, you're gonna make a real G cry. I'm trying to get, but crying again to my people, crying is not a form of weakness. So, I'm just trying not to mess up my makeup on the camera. But the name of my current journal that is out is called The Container. You can purchase it on Amazon if you search The Container by Domonique. My name has 2 O's, not 2 I's, by Domonique Natasha. And you'll see this image that comes up that looks like this one. I was intentional in crafting the journal to be hardcover. You can hear that, right? That looks like stone because it is strong enough to hold all of the intense emotions that are not safe to share with other people. Inside, you're going to find some affirmations that will prompt some thinking of as you journal. I have writing prompts. There are foundational scriptures in there and lots of free write space. It's not too structured, but it gives you the opportunity to be able to do exactly what Bianca said. You start writing about a certain topic and you just let it flow. So again, you can find it on Amazon by searching The Container by Domonique Natasha. You can also follow me on my social media apps on Instagram. I am _ Domonique Natasha. My business page is _ UCA Nation because that's Urban Community Alliance. And then my website where you can learn more about me and the work that I do is ucanation.com.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much. Dominique, for those of you who don't know, I know her as Bamo, so we shout out, our childhood names.
Yeah.
She is amazing. Thank you so much for being a guest. Anybody who's here, share your feedback and share this with people that you feel like really, really will connect with this message or need it, because sometimes we just in journeys to where just hearing somebody break some things down can be super helpful. Obviously, subscribe to the Bianca Williams podcast and rate, comment, share with other people. Watch some of the other episodes. Stay tuned for new episodes and get the channel, y'all, because it's nothing bad that can come out of it. This is all good. So thank you all for tuning in, and we about to head out.